Warning, this podcast is intended for consenting adults. We're talking about all things non-monogamy, which means some of our conversations are going to get down and dirty. Please know we are not professionals, and these are strictly our views and opinions and in no way represent the opinions of our employers. We respect others' opinions as we know everyone in the world of non-monogamy does it differently. Hope you enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to 3 Shades Deeper. This is our first episode of 3 Shades Deeper. You're probably used to us actually from the 3 Shades of Grey podcast, but we decided to do something a little bit different. There's some topics in the world of non-monogamy, kink, swinging, what have you, that might require a little bit more discussion and time to really parse it out and hopefully even bring in some subject matter experts on it. Wouldn't you ladies agree?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So with that being said, we wanted to create this segment to really sit down with certain individuals that we find interesting and have a kind of a long format conversation with them and kind of really get deeper. There's no better way to actually...
Going deep.
Yeah.
Yes, go deeper. So on this first episode we have, as always, I am joined by my lovely wife.
Hello, everybody.
Say your name.
Pinky.
Oh, everybody knows Pinky. And my beautiful girlfriend.
Ava Moore.
Hi, Ava. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm excited about this new segment.
Yes. And
Can I say something before we're going to introduce our guest?
Yes, you may.
I guess Pinky really rubbed off on both of you with her all the feely, touchy thingy-majiggies that you both try to avoid as much as possible.
Yes, Pinky makes us do a lot of things.
Pinky makes us do a lot of things, and she makes us read and listen to a lot of things, which has led us to this segment because she has thrown so much education in our direction that we actually started talking about it, and we're like, oh, we should talk about this so everybody else can hear about it.
Yeah, so everybody thank Pinky.
Thank you, Pinky.
Well, no, it's not thanking Pinky. It's your ability to be vulnerable and being able to be open to it.
Getting away. You're getting
No.
way
I want to say that because it's always.
you're going to spoil the surprise.
Let me just finish. It's all about being okay with not being okay, and then we can proceed from here. Go ahead.
All right. So, our first guest on this segment is actually somebody that Pinky met
Yes.
at Splash Takeovers.
Yep. I
She
did.
actually took one of the workshops, speaking of education, because you're all about the education and the learning and to make, to just gain more knowledge. And
He's the brains of the operation.
Okay.
My pussy is vibrating right now, very hard.
I'm an hour and a half away, and I made your pussy vibrate.
Ooh, we're supposed to be serious on this, ladies.
Sorry, wrong segment.
No,
Wrong segment.
No, it's not.
Just kidding. No, we can always have fun with it. But you met this our guest, and what was the name of the course or the segment that it was about?
It's about how to give a best blowjob
Yes,
to your
blowing his mind.
blowing his mind. Yeah,
Yes,
to whoever you involved, and I just heard it from a great wine that is a workshop happening, and I just step in and I was surprised.
Yes.
Was your mind blown? Not only his.
Oh,
Yes.
definitely.
We mentioned it before. Yes, my mind was blown from everything that you learned at that workshop. So I am extremely grateful for your education.
I'm learning every day. It's amazing. Your body is such a wonderful tool, and knowledge is power. So why not combine both and enjoy the ride?
Yes.
His body is a wonderful.
So, our guest is none other than Beth Darling, and she actually ran the workshop there at Splash. And she is, when you met her there, you actually started speaking with her, and you were really impressed.
Yes, I ran
And,
to you and I said, "Guess who I met just now?"
So, so impressed that we did a little bit of digging and found one of her books and started reading and getting all of the information. And we said, you know what, we want to do this segment and we really want this person on. So a little bit about Beth. She is actually the host of a podcast of her own called the Come With Us podcast. She's also an award-winning Amazon best-selling author of another book called Love and Laughter, Sexy, Meaningful Fun for Everyone. And she's also has this book that we're going to be referring to called The 5 Kinds of Intimacy, How to Keep Your Love Alive. So, without further ado, would you all join me in welcoming Miss Beth Darling to the podcast?
Yoo-hoo!
Hi, Beth. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank y'all for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, but that's a little bit of a twang we're hearing in your voice. Certain part of the continent that you're from?
Well, I live in Houston.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm here for better or worse, but I went to college and law school on the East Coast, so was born in California. So I figure I've kind of covered the country a little.
Okay. So why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself? Maybe particularly how you got to, because it's an interesting story, because you started out what you graduated from school for, and then you ended up being a coach, teaching others, women or individuals, how to give blowjobs. So, yes. Tell us how.
My mother's so proud.
And she should be. She should be.
It's.
So
I'm thankful.
yeah, my journey. Yeah, well, I'm so glad. So I started actually when I was 12 years old. My sex education was my parents threw 3 books at me, and frankly, I knew then, even though I didn't tell anybody, I wanted to write books about sex. I specifically wanted to help parents talk to kids because I knew that there was a gap, right? This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. And frankly, I have been fascinated by sex my whole life. I think growing up in a family without any physical affection or words of affection, I think I was just starved. So my major in college was human development and family studies. But then I ended up going to law school and went into the area of family law, where I said it was 90% counseling and 10% law. And I like the counseling part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, a third of my docket was representing kids going through adoption, custody, whatever, abuse issues. And it just weighed on me so much that I stopped practicing family law and started just coaching people through divorce and stuff. Then when I got divorced myself after 23 years of marriage and 23 years of what I call boring married sex, DMS, I was like, okay, I got to do something. And I went right back to, I still had never learned anything about sex. I had all sorts of shame about my body, shame about my desires. And yet I wanted to date. I wanted to find healthy, happy, sexy, and didn't know how to do it. So then that became my focus. If I was going to learn, I was going to teach other people along the way, because I'm not the only one that was on this journey from prude, right? Total prude, to thinking and realizing that it's really important that we should. In fact, love, sex, and romance, those are the best parts of life.
Yeah.
How this world, we've got them all flipped over and made those the things that we're most ashamed of is
Yes.
pretty foreign to me. So
Out of all of the things about being an adult, the sex, love, and relationships, those kind of rank a little bit higher on it. The
Best part.
working and jobs and bills and all that ranks kind of low.
yes. And so, but I'm really a geek. And so it was all about studying and learning. And I opened a shop in Houston that was everything fun, flirty, frisky, and fetish. And that was my soapbox. I'd have people in, but I would teach workshops. This how to blow his mind while loving his body. Absolutely one of the most popular workshops I've ever done. But everything from dirty talk, etc. And it was within my realm as a coach, because I work with individuals and I work with couples. I work with poly groups. And it was then that I was like, all right, as a coach, you want to figure out and help your clients get wherever they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But my clients and I couldn't figure out where they were specifically trying to get. There's this evasive term called love, intimacy. And to date, nobody had defined intimacy in a way that actually worked, nor had anybody figured out what the ingredients of a happy, healthy, successful relationship were. And so that's when I went on this sort of tangent. Well, not tangent.
A journey.
A journey.
Yes.
To define intimacy and to learn what kinds of intimacy were important to this relationships. And thus, after years I found my 5 kinds of intimacy pretty, a year into owning my shop and teaching. And it took me 3 years of just testing it out and talking to every therapist I could find, working with hundreds of clients on it, thousands of through my podcast and stuff, until I finally said, no, I'm pretty confident in this. And I wrote my book, The 5 Kinds of Intimacy, How to Keep Your Love Alive.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
And I'll tell you, it's not just for romantic relationships. These 5 kinds of intimacy are also important in every relationship.
Yes. So, one of the things that I noticed is, and I want to have our listeners understand that it kind of falls in line with something people have heard before. This might be a little bit new to some people. Everybody is aware of the 5 love languages by Dr. Gary Chapman, which are words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and receiving gifts. And those love languages in the book, they were written in a way that to describe the way that partners or individuals give and receive love. You might speak 2 of them, but you like to receive only 1, and it's so many different parts of it. With your 5 intimacies, it's kind of a package deal, and I'd like you to kind of go a little bit more into it. Why, with the love languages, you can kind of say, I only need 1 or 2 of them, but with your research, you're like, you need all 5, because if you don't have them, something's going to fall by the wayside.
Right. Well, so I think the first thing to recognize is that the 5 love languages are, so let's say you said words of affirmation. Well, if I don't have any emotional intimacy with Ava, for example, I could throw words at her like, oh, your dress is so pretty. Oh, you look so nice today. Or, oh, you are such a good driver. And if I don't actually know her, I'm throwing these words at her. And supposedly she likes words of affirmation. But these are not the things she actually cares about.
Yeah, that's not going to mean anything.
Right. It's going to roll right off her back. It's nothing. So I say intimacy is the substance.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 5 love languages are simply the ways that you can express appreciation for someone, that you can express love for them. But if you don't know what's important to them, if you don't know where to touch them, if you don't know what's going to shut them down, you're not going to get anywhere throwing out the 5 love languages or receiving them, right?
I'm gonna read your definition, if you don't mind, what you call as intimacy. Intimacy is a state that results from a connection, closeness, familiarity, exposure, or proximity that is highly personal, so much that it's so likely to cause a feeling of vulnerability. That is so wonderfully put.
Yeah.
It is so hard to describe intimacy.
Right. And that's the thing. And some people use it as a euphemism for sexual activity.
Yeah.
Some people,
What I thought it was pretty much.
Yeah,
Right.
I think most people would say, "Oh, I'm intimate with somebody." It's like, "Oh yeah, that's fun, sexy time."
Right. And that's sort of an abuse, because we have such intimacy, or we can have so much intimacy with our platonic friends, with our children, with our coworkers. There are so many opportunities for intimacy in this world, even with strangers sometimes, that to limit it to sexual intimacy, is a waste. And I will tell you, it's a disservice, because then when couples are actually engaging in sexual activity together, they're like, oh, well, we have intimacy, so why isn't the rest of our relationship working? I'm like, no. You might have sexual intimacy, but if you don't have physical intimacy, then emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy, romantic intimacy, and spiritual intimacy. One of those is not a happy relationship, just one alone.
Yes.
Again, there are there are people that are in marriages that they don't have, they say, oh, they're my partner's my best friend, my spouse is my best friend. And yet, I promise you, those people wound up in my office as a divorce lawyer because they weren't having sexy fun together.
Yes.
And we don't marry just our best friend. Excuse me.
You're saying in the book, there are quite a few examples that you gave. The one striking one is there was somebody, they're like, oh, you being a divorce lawyer, the couple was very amicable divorce, and one of the spouses went to one of your workshops and said, you know what, if we had done this before we came to see you, we would not have been divorced.
Yeah.
And that struck me a lot. So you mentioned the 5 intimacies, which are physical, emotional, sexual, romantic, and spiritual. Would you mind just tackling a little bit more? Everybody knows about sexual intimacy because that's kind of where it's synonymous. So intimacy kind of seems with sex, where I think most people like our definition of it, but it's not just that.
Right. I was going to say, I think that's also where people get confused, because sexual intimacy certainly includes sexual activity, but it also includes conversations that we're having, not just phone sex, but conversations where we talk about, this is what's going on in my life. Y'all talk about sexual stuff all the time on your podcast. That's a lot of sexual intimacy that you're creating, even with people you don't know.
Yes, definitely.
Right.
Okay. So with respect to our children, it's recognizing them as sexual beings, understanding that we're not talking about sexual activity with our kids, but we are talking that our kids can come to us and talk about their issues in relationships, their struggles, their desire to learn more about sexuality. Coming out is a huge, huge moment of sexual intimacy. And nobody's ever caught that. That's why it's like, we act like it's no big deal, but it is a big deal. But so backing up, you asked me about the 5 kinds. So the first one, physical intimacy, it's hugging, touching, kissing, but it's also being in a crowded elevator with strangers. There's physical intimacy, even if we don't want to admit it, it's there. Emotional intimacy, Sure, it's when we are willing and we're talking, we're expressing ourselves, or we're laughing together. But emotional intimacy is also when Will Smith and Chris Rock at whatever the Academy Awards or something.
Yeah, the slap heard around the world.
Definitely, yeah.
Exactly. Right. We learned so much more about Will Smith than he wanted us to learn. We got some emotional intimacy.
Definitely.
He doesn't know us,
But we know him.
Right. So that's emotional intimacy. And then Chris Rock had that emotional intimacy, plus he got the slap. So he had the emotional and the physical. Sexual intimacy, we already talked about how that can be different than simply, it's not limited just to sexual activity.
Mm-hmm.
Romantic intimacy is the only one that you have to recognize for it to exist. So romantic intimacy is when it can be as simple as the ordinary becoming extraordinary. And I say, so for me, coming from Houston, if I go to Paris and I have a picnic by the Eiffel Tower, that's hugely romantic for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I lived in Paris, 5 minutes away from the Eiffel Tower, a picnic there was just a regular Sunday. It wasn't quite so romantic anymore.
Sure.
Okay. And I will say each of these intimacies, by the way, you have to have with yourself before you're going to be effective at having them with other people, using them to create a healthy, happy relationship. Spiritual intimacy was the last one that I found. And it was because I had a couple come to me who very, very, very much in love. They'd been together for 25 years, but they had both grown up small town Texas, very religious backgrounds. Every time the husband asked for something sexually, the wife in her mind heard, oh, he won't respect me if I do that. Or he must not respect me if he thinks I'm going to do that. Or this is not what good girls do. This is not what good wives do. My priest will not appreciate this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So she was ashamed. She was too limited. And here they were, this loving couple with kids, everything going right, except that she couldn't enjoy sexual intimacy because of this spiritual block. And I say spiritual intimacy is the knowledge, the belief that what you are doing is the right thing with the right person at the right time in the right circumstances. It's good for you. It's good for them. It's good for your family. It's good for the world at large, and basically blessed by whatever your version of the divine is. So it's a wholeheartedness, if you will. So for example, if you're cheating, you're not going to have that spiritual intimacy. You might have excuses for why you're doing something, right? Bad marriage, all these things. But it's not going to be that, oh, this is good. It's going to be, well, this is good, but.
There's a caveat to it.
There's a caveat, right? And I think people need, before they continue, they have to be able to reconcile those things. We have to be able to get to the point of being spiritually intimate and being wholeheartedly accepting it and trusting. So I think that's really a hard one for people that are prudes, that are uptight, right? Well, we might engage in sexual activity, but we're going, don't look at me here. Don't look at this. Or, oh, there's dirty laundry piled up, or we're in my parents' house. Any number of things prevent that spiritual intimacy.
We mentioned before these 5 intimacies. You said they all need to be there for things to work. An example, let's just say, and I think you just mentioned it, so my question was going to be, hey, if there isn't one of these things that's there, you have 4 out of 5, and one of them is missing. It's like I'm thinking that these intimacies are the foundation, not love necessarily, which I wanted to get into, which I know that you mentioned in there some hard truths, as you put them. Mm-hmm. And I recognize 3 of them. The first one was that love is not intimacy. Mm-hmm. Okay. There are different, love is one thing, intimacy is the other. And you did have a definition of love, and I have a definition of love that was kind of challenged by reading your book. But my definition, and I spoke with this to Pinky when we were in our courting stage, and she was the first one to say, I love you. And I
No,
remember.
I did not say that. I said I have those feelings. And you said to put your feelings in a box because I'm not there yet.
No, I did not. You
Give me a couple more weeks.
Now you're making me sound like I'm
Wow,
cold
Anthony.
and callous.
No, that's me. I'm the one with the stone heart, not him.
Yeah,
No,
I don't necessarily remember it that.
No,
but
you did say I'm not ready for it, but thanks for sharing.
well, okay, but so here's the thing. I actually love that. Thank you for sharing that, Pinky, because you know what? I would tell you intimacy is not always intentional. It is not. And so sometimes we create intimacy, emotional, physical, romantic, sexual, spiritual, without wanting to. And so what you did there, Pinky, was you actually shared a great deal of emotional intimacy with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like, oh, wow, now I'm uncomfortable because God knows, right? We're all taught to be uncomfortable with intimacy and vulnerability.
And
But you didn't have a choice. You heard her.
I
It was
heard
there.
her, and
And he feels me, so
No,
he
and
felt it.
And I felt it. I told her I did say that I felt it, but I was not ready to say it. And one of the reasons why I wasn't ready to say it was the last time prior that I had said that, I was the one that initiated, and it pushed somebody away. And when I said it, I saw the reaction immediately, and I gave that caveat. I said, I did not say this for you to actually repeat it back to me. I was saying this because I want to let you know how I feel. So that was me saying that. But the definition, go ahead, I'm sorry.
But here, in fact, when you didn't say it back to Pinky, your reaction, again, like Will Smith, Pinky actually did get an emotional viewpoint perspective on you, right? You're immediate like, oh no, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to acknowledge that. That there's some intimacy there, right? That says a little bit about who you are and how you work and where your emotional state is. And so oftentimes intimacy is created simply by our actions or inaction. And if we are open to it and pay attention, we learn a lot about people, not just through the words that they tell us.
Observation of people's behavior, how they react to you, and even reacting to the world, which we're going to get into that because that goes into another part that we're going to touch on. But going back to the whole thing with love, your opinion of my definition of love that I was giving to Pinky, and I believe I've had this conversation with Ava. My definition of love was, I can't recall where I heard this, but it was, most people have love as this, I have the butterflies, they make me feel this giddy way and all of these different things. And the person who was having this talk about it said, no, that nausea feeling and that giddiness in there, you might be actually having a heart attack. You should be going to the hospital, okay? Because that's not love. Love is something that keeps you calm and grounded. So I've had this way that I look at what love is. And part of what love is the definition that I had in my head, and I'd spoken to Pinky about that, is love is in spite of. So in spite of all of the negative things, you don't take the garbage out, or you're this, you're that, or little things that, or whatever. In spite of all the quote unquote bad things, I still choose you and want to be with you. And that had been my definition of what love is for quite some time. And I wanted to know what your opinion on that definition, or as part of the definition as you see love.
Okay, this is where my lawyer brain,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot. It took me a while to figure out intimacy, right? I haven't figured out good, firm definition of love. I believe it's like intimacy. I think there are lots of different kinds of love. I believe that what you're talking about is true. That sometimes we love people despite their flaws. Sometimes we love people because of their flaws. Sometimes we love people we don't want to love. But I don't have a specific definition. If I did, that would be my next book, I promise, because I think that would be very, very helpful.
Well, we might have to work on that because, as
Yeah.
you said, you don't have a definition, but you've, from the reading, you've taken a few things that love isn't. As we mentioned before, love isn't intimacy.
Right.
The other brutal truth is love isn't everything. Okay.
Yes.
Would you want to parse that out or expand on that a little bit more?
So we can start with the fact that love isn't intimacy. I loved my husband of 23 years. I truly, truly loved him. I had these great, enormous feelings for him, despite the fact that a lot of times I didn't like him, despite the fact that he didn't like me, despite the fact that we had almost zero emotional intimacy. I still had these feelings that to me, I feel like are love. So love is definitely not intimacy, but then also love is not everything, because I did love him and I still needed to get divorced, and he needed to get divorced, and he would tell you that he loved me too. So love without intimacy is really not going to stick. Intimacy without love is probably not going to stick very well, because you just like, you can have it for your dry cleaner, right? You could, the person who takes care of my nails has cancer now, right? Oh my God, I feel so much love for her, so much empathy and stuff for her. But there's no real intimacy. I mean, she helps me, but I don't know who she is deep down. And so we're not going to stay together forever. It's just, love and intimacy are both very separate and distinct, but they are really good when they're mixed together in a positive way. You could have love and a lot of intimacy in an abusive relationship. You might have a lot of emotional intimacy there, but it's still not good. And even though there's intimacy and there's love, it shouldn't stick with it.
And it goes to the other brutal truth that I saw where you said, and I'm sure all of the Beatle fans will not like this, but love isn't all you need.
Nope. It is not. Anybody who's ever dealt with anybody with any mental illness knows that already from the start, right? Anybody with physical ailments, love helps, but it doesn't take away COVID. It doesn't take away the flu. It doesn't, it doesn't fix our arms. Love is not all you need. So I think, love it's ephemeral. Love is like cotton candy. It just, oh my God, it feels so good. It tastes so good, but if there's no intimacy, it just is going to dissipate. It's going to just sort of fall away into whatever there is. It melts. Isn't it funny? I'm such a romantic in some ways, and I'm so logical and geeky and
I think
pragmatic in others.
I would consider myself the same. Thank you, Pinky, for making me read and consume this information. But as I read it, I was just like, okay, I can see where it's going. And that's the reason why I said, well, let me ask this question and kind of, bounce the idea back and forth, because I like to say, if everything that I've said, I've come to the point to say I could be wrong. And there's part of me that sometimes wants I want that person that can say, you know what, challenge me to let me know that, hey, you were wrong on that. Okay, thank you. I'll thank you for that. Okay, because,
Yes.
who wants to be walking around with bad information in their head and saying, like, you know what, this is what it is. I put it down. I say this is what it is. But if it isn't tested and worked out, and which is obviously what you did for this book with your research, let me test this. How do I get it and break it down into all of these parts? Which, like I said, anybody that's listening, and we're going to put the information about Beth in the show notes and different things, so you can read the book and make your own opinion about this information.
I have to,
Go ahead.
I have to say, I had quite a few aha moments as I was reading, looking back on maybe previous relationships. I mean, relationships I have now are healthier than my previous relationships. But it was always like, as I was reading, at the end of the day, we had certain things, but unsuccessful relationships definitely did not have intimacy. I myself didn't allow them necessarily to have intimacy. It took me a long time to get to the point where I allowed intimacy in my relationships.
You mean when you met me?
Listen, you can't take all of the credit.
If my guess is, Ava, if I could challenge you, my guess is that you actually had some kinds of intimacies, or you wouldn't have had a relationship.
We did, but we definitely did not hit on all of them and
That's
have
right.
true intimacy as define it.
But just to be clear, I don't know that there's true intimacy, right? What I do believe is that each of these 5 kinds of intimacy are imperative in a happy, healthy relationship.
Yep.
But so I hate to say, if you have all 5, then it's quote true intimacy, because you can have a lot of meaningful intimacy in relationships that don't include all of them. So for example, pen pals have no physical intimacy. They're just long distance, but they can have so much emotional intimacy. They could have romantic because it's cool and exciting every time you get a letter or an email. You could have spiritual because you feel good about this relationship that you're creating and stuff. You may or may not have sexual intimacy, but what you have is still good. It's just not going to necessarily be enough to carry you through your whole life, which is why people like military people, when they are separated, it is really hard, no matter how much love there is, no matter how much emotional intimacy there is. It's really hard to be physically away from somebody, to not have any physical intimacy with them for long periods of time. So what I say, though, is that if you're missing one, if one is hard, then work on the others and try to find ways to create things that sort of work for you. So just for an example, the physical intimacy, because that's such a common one. And I think I heard you say, Ava, you're an hour and a half away from them, right?
Yep.
So I would say that some things you can do to sort of work around, not forever, but on a reasonable basis, is to do touching of yourself and describe how you feel or how you'd like your partner to touch you, and use your own physicality to substitute for your partner's physicality. Right? There's a bit of a creative workaround. So again, I just don't want people to think it's hopeless. Okay, if we can't have this kind of intimacy, then the whole thing's off, because I don't think that's true. But I do think that the best and longest relationships and most satisfying are going to have all 5 of those intimacies. And at least if you acknowledge that one's missing, you work on the others, and then you try to find ways to bring that one back up to a level that feels good for both of you.
I think vulnerability comes back for me over and over again, because what intimacy is for me is not intimacy for my husband, or a different level of intimacy. For him, he says that if I am in a close proximity in the house, doing something close to him, he's happy as a doll. I am like, what are you talking about? I need to be on top of you. I need to be pulling on your beard, and kissing you.
Smothered.
Yeah, like literally, like, and it's so different, right?
Right. I think the fact most women, we think emotional intimacy is talking, laughing, crying, right? There is a very expressive, emotive component to emotional intimacy. But men, I think your husband's not the only one who can feel very emotionally intimate with silence.
Yeah,
That they can feel.
I totally don't.
I
I don't
agree.
understand that.
Yes,
I can.
Yes,
Yep.
I. It doesn't have to be spoken, which is how kind of
Mhm.
I relate with Ava in that way, where there was a silent shorthand where we kind of knew how we felt, and things weren't necessarily said initially, but then Pinky comes along and it's like, we're going to talk about our feelings, and
She's like, you love each other. Now tell each other you
now
love each other.
you have to say it. Say it.
We knew it. We knew it. We just
but
never,
we didn't
talked
use our
about it.
words.
You
And
beautiful
for-
introverts. Come on
and
out of
for
your
me-
corners.
Being able to be silent with somebody is very intimate. Like if
And-
I'm with
Yes.
somebody and I don't feel the need to talk, so there's not silence, I'm very connected to that person when I'm able to do that. If I'm chattering away, I'm trying to avoid an uncomfortable feeling. But if I can be comfortable being silent with someone, that says a lot for me.
I agree.
Right.
When we first started talking, we'd have conversations on the phone, and I would ask a question or you would ask me a question, but there are some times when I would just be quiet. And she's like, are you okay? I was just like, no, I was just wanted you to say and get everything kind of your full thought out instead of necessarily jumping in, which if we go back and listen, as we're doing this podcast, sometimes I have I'm trying to work on it, but, allowing somebody to get a full thought out, and I'm comfortable with silence. That's just me. So that's how Ava and I relate to that.
Yep.
I have learned with Pinky that and with anybody, you have to put the effort in. Okay, if you don't put the effort into,
I can't read your mind, damn it.
No,
Say
you
it
can't.
how and when and how and whatever, because it's all nicey and whatever that you can be comfortable in the quiet area with me, but I cannot still understand what you want and how you want it. So express yourself.
I let you know.
Now, yes.
Yes.
Not before.
No, it's something that
but I
was
think
learned.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to recognize that, again, some people, when it comes to physical intimacy, some people love to hold hands. Other people, their hands get clammy and sweaty, right? Some people just love to have their hair stroked. Other people, not so much. It's not that there's a right way and a wrong way. It's that whoever's in the relationship has their preferred ways, things that really resonate and feel good with them. And the other person may have very different perspective and very different taste. But that's where getting to know, this is where the emotional intimacy component is huge, because you really have to really get to know what somebody is deep down, so that sometimes silence can be okay. And sometimes you can use your words. Like, you both have to be sort of adaptable in many situations.
Yeah, and respect each other's differences. That's so important, which is totally come into play where you live with somebody, you're not dating anymore, and where he likes to leave his socks behind.
Yes.
And those little tiny things that
Little
could be
things.
annoying, but that's okay, we work through it. Pick up your
like,
damn
even
socks.
even for you and I, Pinky, we talk about how vastly different we are, but we have very intimate conversations and very intimate interactions. And there's sometimes, because we are so different, right? Her energy is not matching my energy or whatever. And once in a while, I'm like, okay, you're stressing me out. Like, I need you just to, I'm stressed and you're making it worse. Where she's trying to help, right? She's truly loving me and trying to help me in that moment. And I'm like, okay, you're making it worse. So please. And then she'll recognize it. She'll recognize it and be like, I'm sorry, I'll give you your space. So it's acknowledging that and being understanding of that, I think.
Which is going into another part, as you mentioned that there are a couple of myths people have about intimacy. And during this conversation, we kind of touched on a few of those. And that one that you just mentioned, Ava, sounds like one that is talking about intimacy is not always positive. Okay.
Right.
Which is a myth. Yeah. It's not always a positive feeling like, oh, you're intimate. It's a good thing. Sometimes it's not so good.
Well, and I think that, so for easy peasy way to see that is peeping Toms, right? They're getting a great deal of intimacy and we are not comfortable with it. It doesn't feel good. I think the whole debate when they are trying to deal as a society, trying to figure out sexual assault, whether or not, why should that be different than just a regular assault? When you think of my 5 kinds of intimacy, it becomes clear because with a regular assault, you get physical intimacy with somebody. You don't necessarily get emotional intimacy with them, but they might cry, for example, but you're not then having sexual intimacy on top of those others. But rape is physically intimate. It is emotionally intimate because we are so vulnerable in trying to protect ourselves and scared and fearful. And there's the power that is involved. And then there's the sexual intimacy. So when you start realizing that, then you realize that to heal, you have to heal each of those wounds that comes. And to deny an intimacy because you just don't like it, because it doesn't feel good, and we want the term intimacy to be this joyful, whipped cream flavored candy stuff. That doesn't serve us. We need to be very clear about what it is so that we also recognize the violations, which are the negative things. But they affect us just as much as the positive, if not more.
Yes. So a couple other myths that you brought up are intimacy always works both ways. When you have that, what was an example where you say intimacy always works both ways? People believe that.
Right. So they think that because there's an intimacy that it has to be on both people's part. But again, we saw with like Will Smith that it was a one-way street. He didn't know us, but we got to see him. Mm-hmm. We got emotional intimacy from him, but he didn't get it from us. And frankly, he doesn't even know who watched it or not. So he's not even aware of whether I feel like I have emotional intimacy with him or not. And it doesn't matter. The fact is it's still there. And peeping Toms, again, we might not know that there's a peeping Tom, but they're getting an eyeful, whether we know it or not. Sometimes in romantic intimacy, I said, because that one you have to acknowledge or it just doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. So I was with my granddaughter on a whaling. We were out on a boat looking at whales. And when we saw a blue whale, which less than 1% of the world has seen, right? I'm in tears. It's the most magical, exciting, amazing thing. It is so much romantic intimacy for me. My granddaughter, on the other hand, is like, okay, I'm done.
It's Let's a go. Fish.
It's a really big fish.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm happy for you, Bubby, that you got it. But so she didn't have it. So 2 people experiencing the exact same thing may or may not feel the intimacy levels that another does. I talk about my sex life all the time. I talk about sexy stuff with people all the time. So to me, sharing a lot of stuff doesn't even feel like I'm being vulnerable. But other people are like, oh my God, that's so much intimacy. I can't believe you tell people, So recognize that. Different levels, And again, I think that's where the vulnerability often comes in, is how vulnerable we feel.
Okay.
I love how you just said in terms of you being you, authentic you, and talking about something that's important to you. And I've really embraced that recently, where I have a podcast that deals with sexuality, and I have to embrace that fully. And when I tell that to people, at first in the beginning, I had sweaty palms. Like, oh my God, I'm actually doing this, literally like telling strangers that I have a podcast that it deals with sexuality. And then people will roll their eyes or will say, oh, they'll embrace it. And I have to be okay with both. And that is such a vulnerability. And for me, like, I don't really don't, I mean, to people that I say, of course I care, but I in the end, I don't, because I'm going to keep doing what I believe in, whether you like it or not.
So after everything that we have been really talking about, a lot of good information has been given to us, and we just really touched on the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this book is not only informative, but it's a workbook, for lack of a better term. There are things that you guys can do, but to sum it up in a little bit, I think the question, particularly for us in our audience, is what would you say is the best way that we can use this book or the information that you present in a poly non-monogamous dynamic? Like, what is the best way to consume it or process it, you would say?
I think, again, that these 5 kinds of intimacies, that we have to get good with them with ourselves first, right? If we don't know ourselves, if we don't accept ourselves, or if we don't like our body, if we don't like the way, we're a little bit judgy or a little bit bitchy sometimes, or a little bit snarky, that emotional intimacy, whatever. So we have to get good with ourselves. If you're not good with yourself with all these 5 kinds of intimacies, you're going to have a really hard time connecting with somebody else on all 5. You're going to block them. Like Ava was saying, she prevented people from having too many, too much intimacy with her. She kept them at a distance, and therefore the relationships sort of fall off. So certainly start with yourself. Then you can see how you can connect with one other person. Then if you can't handle, connecting and being good with yourself and creating something with somebody else, it's really going to be hard to have poly, right? To have multiple relationships. So I think just recognizing that about yourself and going slowly, right? Poly is not a way to fix a monogamous relationship.
No.
Never going to do that.
No.
It's actually, if you're not secure, this doesn't work, because it does challenge everything when you add somebody else, and you add another party to it. It will challenge everything, and if you're not strong, you don't have to be 100% unbreakable, but a pressure test or a stress test, it definitely is.
Right. And nobody's 100% unbreakable. But so, for example, some people have in their relationship, for example, they might have where sexual intimacy is not going very well. And then they'll be like, okay, well, maybe we should try swinging, which is one version of ethical non-monogamy. And let's just get our sexual intimacy needs met with somebody else. I don't think that's really going to be a great way to do it, because I'm telling you, you need these 5 kinds of intimacy with whomever you're in the relationship with.
I've
to have
tried
the best chance at long-term success. So then, but now let's just say, for example, you're you 3 here. So Anthony, you and Pinky, you guys need to have all these 5 kinds of intimacy together. And when you're strong in that regard, now you can bring in Ava, and you and Ava create these 5 kinds of intimacies as well. And then I loved what Ava said, though. Even though, can we share this, Ava? You want to share it with the world?
Sure. I said that even though Pinky and I are not physically involved, we hit on all 5 of these anyway in our relationship.
And I would say, but physically, are you sometimes together?
Oh yeah,
I think
in the
it
same
is. Right.
space.
So
Quite often,
right.
yeah.
So you don't have sexual activity intimacy,
Correct.
but you have the other 5 kinds of intimacy. You talk about a sexual life. You talk about your sexual relations with Anthony. You guys have to be very clear about where the boundaries are and safety and all sorts of issues, right? So even though there's no actual sexual activity with Pinky, it's still beautiful. And part of the reason I think that your relationship is so strong with Anthony is because you and Pinky do have these 5 kinds of intimacy, which means that you're both safe and secure with each other as well as with Anthony, right? So if you guys weren't, how hard relationships one-on-one are hard enough, but if you've got somebody in the background who's sniping, who's not feeling good, who's not feeling connected, it's hard. Whether that other person is a paramour, a metamour, a mother-in-law, a best friend. So these 5 kinds of intimacies, again, they help cement good relationships and then create abilities to emphasize and to have other great relationships without taking away from something or negatively impacting one.
I mean, we have blanket trust, I think, with each other because
definitely.
of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from vulnerability because we all walked into this together and we said it's okay to be honest and open with one another fully.
And it wasn't, and we don't want to get anybody out there. It just didn't just happen like right away.
Mm-mm.
This is, like I said,
The process.
over time. And if you've heard some of our other interviews, especially some of our first or second episodes from 3 Shades of Grey, and you've heard like our backstory or how we got to this, it wasn't just a overnight, like, oh, we met together and everything happened. No, it takes time. It's an active process. Okay. You have to, not to sound cliche-ish, but if you don't do the work, you're not going to see the results. And what you're hearing here from us is the culmination of doing the work. It's not all glamorous.
No, it's not.
Have we had times where we have wanted to strangle each other? Definitely.
Yep.
Okay, it's happened. Have there been tears and just like, I'm done and leave me alone? We've had that, but it's work, and this is the culmination of
No,
it.
we never had I'm done. We had I cannot communicate right now. I need space.
Well,
I'm struggling.
It's
Right.
struggling, but it hasn't been saying I'm done, but it has been brought up where, hey, if this isn't working out, like, you know what, we're just going to
Yes.
leave it right where it is, and that's it. So, and it wasn't
It's
even,
possible.
it didn't even come as a threat. It was just like, we had the communication skills to be able to say, okay, there's a problem, there's an issue. One of the solutions is we might have to just say, we stop this.
Well, so, and I think what is important to realize, right, is that intimacy, particularly emotional intimacy, particularly, is that it's like peeling back an onion. So you get this level of emotional intimacy, and you're like, cool, this is great. And then what happens? Something new comes up. Now you've got a whole new level there that you have to deal with. And it continues. We never know ourselves completely. We never know how we're going to react in any, circumstances. So how can we know that about our partner? We can't. So it's a never-ending onion and layers that you have to be willing to pull back. And you're right. You have to be willing. You can pause. You can go slowly. You may just let it sit for a little bit to ripen a little bit more. But if you just give up and you refuse to start dealing with the levels, whatever you're seeing on that onion, if you refuse to go deeper, it's going to stagnate. Your relationship will stagnate.
Yeah. I think once again, I'm going to bring vulnerability back again. It's just so amazing to be able to be vulnerable with you too, and truly like peeling the layers of the onion and really be your authentic self, saying this is what I have right now, and it's okay. We are never going to be always 50-50, whatever. Sometimes somebody has to carry 80 and the other two, like carry
20 and
10 and
yeah,
10,
10 and
like
10.
whatever it is.
Mhm.
But as long as we all communicating about it and saying, listen, this is hard shit. Can you give me grace? Can you hold space for me? Can you understand that I'm having a hard time right now, and just let's breathe together or something like that. Let's go for a walk. Let's just look at each other's eyes and just play a silly game or something, like let's take that edge off, and then we can go back to it and talk about it later, about something that is very challenging. But let's not be, let's not shunt. Is that the right word to say? Shunt each other off?
Yes, let's not shun each other or putting anybody down.
Yeah, because I've been in a relationship where it was a current occurrence of disconnect, where person is not talking to you for a day or two, and it's like, what is going on here? You give me some kind of reference when we can restart this conversation. Don't just let me hang, because that's not a good feeling.
No, not at all.
Right. And that's the thing, when there's a problem, when you're struggling with one kind of intimacy, withholding the other forms of intimacy is not helpful. And yet it's instinctual. We think, oh, they're not meeting my emotional needs. I don't want to touch them. I don't want to see them, blah, blah, blah. No. You have to try and get a grip and find a way. You'll do better. You don't have to. You will do better if you actually pull together through another form of intimacy, whether that could be romantic intimacy. Look, we've been fighting. Let's go watch a sunset together.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dance together. It can be, let's just hold hands, right? Let's just touch without talking for just a few minutes. It's really hard to fight with somebody when you're touching.
Doing that, and you mentioned that, as we said, doing the work, you have about 16 or so activities or challenges for couples to do. One of them being the back-to-back, skin-to-skin, and conversation, and doing that, or different ways to create connection. So we wish we did have a lot more time to get into so much more, because it is a very interesting book, and we're hoping that you'll come back and
Happily.
yes, and we can discuss a different aspect of the book or what have you on a future episode. But before we go, Pinky, did you have any questions for Beth? Anything that you wanted to just quickly touch on or follow up on?
Well, I actually wanted to highlight your specialty in having your own platform where you actually give one-to-one opportunities for people to learn how to do better in relationships, and in whatever format it is. Even like giving a best blowjob, one of those amazing conversations that I was a part of. But you also have others. I don't know them all by heart right now, but they're the way you are in terms of putting your law practice into play, into presenting during your workshop as a person who is rational, but also you bringing so much other aspects of it where as a human you just shine. And all I wanted to do during the whole workshop, well, you were wearing your beautiful red robe. Yeah, shine. Embrace our sexuality. We all have desires, wants, fantasies. Oh my God, since I was 13 years old, I had a fantasy of being in an orgy. Have I lived through one yet? No. But it's a fantasy. Like I have
not all fantasies are made to be reality. They're fantasies for a reason.
Yeah, and it's okay. Maybe one day I will be a part of this fantasy that I have. Like,
Maybe.
there's sex
We'll see.
everywhere, and I'm a part of this. So as of now, I can't handle it. I get overwhelmed. I overstimulated. I need more like one-to-one, intimate interaction where I can look at your eyes, and it's just you and I, and it feels so much more to me. But that's how I do it. It does not mean that everybody else have to do it this way. Everybody else do their desires, their needs, and their wants of how they want to do it. But still, it's talk about intimacy. It's different levels. For each person is a different level. So I just wanted to say thank you for your coming to our conversation, coming into our platform here, and talking about your book and talking about your personal life and how you've been married and separated and still, like have a common denominator, which is children. We all have, some of us have children after separation, whatever, some of us don't. And overall, we have to deal with our past in order for us to move forward. And I just want to say thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a pleasure. I was so glad that you stumbled into the How to Blow His Mind While Loving His Body workshop. It was great to have you there. And I'm glad Anthony got his mind blown.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm so glad. With respect to fantasies and stuff, right? So I coach with individuals or couples or, like I said, poly stuff. And sometimes it is about, do we want this fantasy to come to life, or do we want to keep it as a fantasy? Do we want to play with that fantasy and find creative ways to implement it, even without actually physically doing it, right? There's so many different creative ways that we can enhance our sexy fun together. There are ways people, if they've got ED issues, they can still have an amazing, fantastic, sexy life. And I think that's where I feel like my superpower is my ability to be creative and pragmatic at the same time without judgment, and to help people find answers to things that other people can't, like the definition of intimacy. And then, by the way, if anybody wants if they want to take the How to Blow His Mind While Loving His Body, that is one of the courses that I offer as a video class at BethDarling.com, as well as the flip one, which is the art of orally pleasuring her. So, and because of y'all, I wanted to help your listeners out, and they can use a discount code. They can use 3 shades, 3 shades, one word, 3 shades, and we'll give them $50 off either one class or the combo his and her class.
Oh, wow. That's very generous of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our listeners will definitely appreciate that. Ava, anything that you want to add before we let Beth go?
I just want to thank you for joining us. And thank you for, again, that one quote in your book that vulnerability is not weakness, because I always saw it as a weakness. And once in a while, I need to be reminded that it's okay to be vulnerable. So I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad that resonated with you. And if I can give you a visual to go with that, it's a willow tree. Think of a willow tree that just bends with the wind versus some big hard oak, much wind, and it just flips over and it's gone. The willow, in times, powerful storms, the willow just bends and comes back, bends and comes back. That's vulnerability.
That's great. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes,
analogy.
I'm so happy. Well, thank you. And if your listeners have any questions, they can email me at beth@darlingway.com or find me at BethDarling.com.
All right. Beth, once again, thank you so much for spending this time with us. This is the first time, but hopefully will not be the last. So from all of us here at 3 Shades Deeper,
yoo-hoo.
Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See you soon.
Bye. Thank you.